The hole in the wall. A couple discovers a small hole in the wall of their new home. What starts as an innocent curiosity transforms into a nightmare, and they realize that something inside the hole is watching them, and it's getting bigger every day. The first thing I noticed when we arrived in town was the smell of the countryside, a blend of freshly cut grass and wildflowers. It was an aroma I hadn't experienced in a long time, and it washed over me with a wave of nostalgia. Jake was driving with a smile on his face, and I couldn't help but smile back. The sunlight filtered through the trees, creating a beautiful pattern of shadows and light along the road. It was the beginning of a new life, and excitement pulsed in my chest. When we finally caught sight of the Victorian house, my heart raced. It was as if we had stepped out of a period film. The tall windows, ornate trim, and the porch with white columns left me speechless. "Look at this, Emily!" Jake exclaimed, parking the car and jumping out. He looked like a kid in a candy store, completely enchanted. "It's perfect." I stepped out of the car and approached, admiring every detail. The house seemed to have stories to tell, and I was eager to uncover each one. "Do you think we can redecorate all of this?" I asked, imagining how we could transform the place into a home. "Absolutely," Jake replied, running his hand along the front of the house. A new beginning for both of us. Our enthusiasm was palpable. We climbed the porch stairs and stepped inside. The scent of aged wood and dust enveloped us as we opened the door. The interior had a rustic charm, with dark wooden floors and walls covered in faded wallpaper. "We could paint these walls light blue," I suggested, looking around. "And maybe add some shelves for books, and a comfy couch," Jake added, already envisioning the decorated space. "We can make this place amazing." We began to explore the rooms, laughing and making plans. I felt light, as if all our problems had been left behind in the previous city. However, a strange sensation began to form in the air, an unease I couldn't quite identify. The house felt observant. "Hey, have you noticed how this house has a peculiar vibe?" I asked, trying to sound casual, although a sense of discomfort began to envelop me. "Peculiar? How so?" Jake turned to me, a curious expression on his face. "I don't know, it's like there's something more here. A presence." I hesitated, not wanting to rain on our parade, but the feeling was undeniable. "You're just getting carried away by the atmosphere of the place. It's an old house, full of stories," Jake said, laughing. "Let's focus on how we're going to make this our home." He was right, of course. The house had a rich history, and being both passionate about the past, it was easy to let our imaginations run wild. We continued exploring, climbing the creaky stairs to the upper floor, where the walls were adorned with dark wooden frames. It was then that we found the living room. It was spacious, with an imposing fireplace and windows that let in generous amounts of light. And it was there that I spotted the hole in the wall. "Jake, look at this," I called, pointing to the small opening. "What do you think it is?" He approached, leaning in for a closer look. "It must just be a wear-and-tear hole. These old houses have their quirks, right?" He smiled, but I could sense a hint of hesitation in his voice. "Don't you think it's a bit strange?" I asked, running my hand along the wall around the hole. There was something intriguing, almost hypnotic, about the way the wood had worn there. "Strange? No, I think it's just part of the charm of the house," Jake replied, but his expression showed that he was also intrigued. "Let's leave that for later. We have plenty to do." That night, as we settled in, the hole in the wall lingered in my mind. I wondered if there was something more behind it. What could have caused that hole? And why did I feel that something was hiding there, waiting to be discovered? Later that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. The silence of the house was profound, but there was a kind of whisper that seemed to float in the air. I turned to Jake, who was already asleep, his face relaxed and peaceful. I wished I could share with him the unease that was invading me, but I didn't want to disturb him. So, I closed my eyes and tried to focus on something lighter. But instead, the image of the hole in the wall returned to my mind. It was just a hole, right? But why couldn't I shake the feeling that it hid something? Something that shouldn't be uncovered. Sleep finally took me, but not without the shivers that came from imagining what might be on the other side of the wall. Some time later, I was awakened by a sound. It was a whisper, so low that I could barely distinguish it. I slowly got up, trying not to wake Jake. The whisper seemed to be coming from the hole. I approached, my heart racing, and put my ear close to the wood. What I heard was indistinct, but it sounded like a voice. Was it a call? A plea? Adrenaline surged through my veins, and I recoiled, almost in shock. "Emily!" Jake murmured, waking up. "What was that?" I heard something," I replied, my voice trembling slightly. "Something coming from the hole." He sat up, his eyes still sleepy widening. "What do you mean by something? Were you just dreaming?" "No, I wasn't." I protested, trying to show him it wasn't just a fantasy. "There was a voice, Jake. I swear." "Let's take a look then," he said, getting out of bed. There was a mix of skepticism and concern in his gaze. We approached the hole, and Jake squatted down, peering inside. "I don't see anything here." "It's just a hole," he said, but his voice had a tone of uncertainty. "But I heard." I insisted, frustrated. "I can't be the only one feeling this." He stepped back a bit, as if thinking. "Emily, maybe you're just worrying too much. It's an old house, full of stories. It could just be your imagination." "I don't know, Jake." A chill ran down my spine. "I feel like something isn't right." He hesitated, and for a moment, it seemed like he was about to support me, but he shook his head instead. "Let's try to sleep, okay? Tomorrow, when daylight comes, everything will seem different." I wanted to believe him. But as I returned to bed, the unease wouldn't let me be. The hole in the wall felt like more than just an architectural detail. There was something there, something that was just beginning to reveal itself. And I was determined to find out what it was. Night had fallen, and the Victorian house seemed to come alive under the dim light of the moon filtering through the dusty windows. I remembered how excited we had been that morning, brimming with expectations about what our new home would bring. But now, as the chill of the night settled in and the sounds of the house grew more audible, a sense of unease crept into my being. I lay in bed next to Emily, who seemed restless, tossing and turning. "Jake, did you hear that?" Her voice broke the silence of the night. I sat up in bed, trying to focus on the sounds around us. The creaking of the floorboards under the pressure of some unseen movement. "What did you hear, love?" I asked, trying to remain calm. "I don't know, whispers, maybe." She sat up in bed, her eyes wide. "It sounds like it's coming from the living room." A chill ran down my spine. "Whispers? You must be dreaming. This house is old, it could just be the wind blowing through the cracks." "No, Jake. I'm awake. It's not just the wind. I feel like something is here." The fear in her voice was palpable, and I didn't know how to comfort her. I got up and walked to the door, opening it slowly. The hallway was dark, but a faint light emanated from the living room. "I'll go check it out." "Stay here, okay?" I said, trying to sound confident. "No. Don't go alone." Emily sprang up, her eyes fixed on me. "If you hear the whispers, it could be dangerous." "I'll be fine. Just give me a minute." The truth was, I was also curious. The idea that something supernatural could be happening intrigued me, even though reason told me to be careful. I descended the stairs, each step echoing, and the light in the living room seemed to pulse, as if it were alive. As soon as I entered, the atmosphere was heavy, and the hole in the wall drew my attention. Hashtag, it felt as if something was pulling me, and as I got closer, I heard the whispers again. Now they were clearer, more distinct. Jake. Jake. I'm here, I murmured, not realizing I was responding to a voice I shouldn't be hearing. The hole seemed larger now, as if it were expanding, and the whispers became more urgent. Jake, help us. I hesitated, a mix of desperation and curiosity swirling inside me. What was this? Some kind of echo from the past? Or just my mind playing tricks? Emily. I shouted, calling her to come. She appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. What's happening? Listen. I pointed to the hole. Aren't you hearing it? They're calling for me. Jake, this isn't normal. We need to get out of here. She started to back away, but I felt trapped, as if an invisible force was holding me there. No, wait. I need to understand. I knew I was being reckless, but curiosity was stronger than fear. Please, come here. Hear what I'm hearing. Emily hesitated, but finally approached, still keeping a safe distance. I don't like this. I feel like we shouldn't be here. But what if it's something important? What if someone needs help? The idea of helping someone, even in such a strange way, fascinated me. The whispers intensified, now seeming to form words. Jake, help us, we're trapped. Are you hearing this? I asked, turning to her. They're asking for help. This is madness. You're becoming obsessed. We need to sleep on this and think about it in the morning. Emily was clearly distressed, and the worry on her face made me hesitate. I can't just ignore it, I replied, almost in a whisper. What if it's a cry for help? You don't know if it's safe. It could be a trap. She was almost in tears, and my heart ached seeing the fear in her expression. Please, Jake, let's move away from this. I looked at her, and the tension between us grew. What if I go? What if I discover something that could help us? We can't just run away from the unknown. You're not getting it. You're putting yourself in danger. I want you to listen to me, she insisted, her voice becoming more strained. Those whispers, they aren't from who you think. I know it's scary, but it's also intriguing, I tried to argue, but as I spoke, a part of me began to doubt. My instincts were screaming that something was wrong. The atmosphere was heavy, and the feeling that the house was watching us enveloped us like a fog. Jake, please, she pleaded, her voice trembling. Let's get out of the house. We need fresh air. I can't stay here. Finally, something in her gaze made me relent. Her fear was contagious, and I couldn't ignore how much it affected her. Okay, let's step outside, I agreed, trying to calm her. But just for a moment. I just need to understand a little more about what's happening. We stepped out onto the porch, and the cold night air made me feel more alert. The sounds of nature around us contrasted sharply with what we had left behind. Emily took a deep breath, and I could see the tension in her shoulders ease a bit. Thank you for listening to me, she said, looking at me with gratitude. I don't want this to affect you. This is more than just an old house. I know, and I feel it too. I was honest, remembering the shadows I had seen on the walls, the voices that seemed to echo in the back of my mind. But we need to find out what's going on, we can't just walk away. Jake, I'm scared, she admitted, and the vulnerability in her voice broke my heart. Those whispers, they make me feel like we're being watched. I feel like we're not alone. We'll face this together, okay? I won't let you go through this alone, I promised, holding her hand. We'll support each other, whatever is haunting us. As we talked, I felt a presence behind us, and a chill ran down my spine. I looked over my shoulder and saw a shadow in the doorway, something that seemed to move, but when I looked directly, there was nothing. I wanted to share this with Emily, but a part of me feared it would only scare her more. We went back inside, and the house felt colder, darker. The hole in the wall seemed more threatening than before. Let's just take a look. If nothing happens, I promise I'll step away, I said, trying to find a balance between curiosity and the need to protect Emily. Jake, I don't know if this is a good idea, she replied, hesitantly. I need to know what's happening, at least so I can protect you, I insisted, and then, together, we approached the hole once more. The whispers continued, but now they seemed more distant, as if they were hiding from us. Jake, help us. I'm listening, but why won't you reveal yourself? I shouted, my voice echoing in the silent room. If you need help, show yourself. Jake, no. Emily screamed, her face pale. But it was too late. The hole seemed to pulse, and the light emanating from it began to intensify. I didn't know if I was being led by fear or curiosity, but something inside me wanted to understand. I just need to know, I murmured, and when I looked at Emily, I saw the fear in her eyes, which made me hesitate. Maybe we should go. Yes, please, she said, almost in a whisper, pulling me back. Let's leave, Jake. Now. As we stepped away, the whispers began to morph into low, dark laughter, as if the house were mocking us. You can't escape, you can't run away. The tension between us escalated, and I knew we had to confront this, but doubt began to settle in my mind. What were we really dealing with? What did this house truly guard? And, most importantly, what did it mean for us? The morning light filtered through the curtains of our new home, and as I sipped my coffee, a strange feeling wrapped around me. The Victorian house, with its ornate details and majestic architecture, seemed more than just a home. There was something in the air, a palpable energy that left me uneasy. The hole in the living room wall bothered me, and yet my curiosity grew with each passing day. Jake was sitting at the table, engrossed in the research he had started about the house's history. Did you remember to ask the neighbor about the old resident? I asked, trying to break the silence that hung between us. He looked up from his laptop and smiled, but there was a shadow in his gaze. Not yet. I'm trying to find some information online first. It seems the house has an interesting past. The former resident disappeared mysteriously, Jake said, typing quickly. We have to find out what happened to her. Don't you think that's a bit macabre? I hesitated. What if she really disappeared because of something supernatural? Jake laughed, but the laugh sounded nervous. You're letting your imagination run wild. It's just an old house. There could be logical explanations for all this. As he spoke, my gaze drifted back to the hole in the wall. It was there, discreet, yet it seemed to be calling me. I could hear the whispers more clearly now, and the thought that something might be there, watching, unsettled me. I just can't stop thinking about the hole, Jake. What do you think it really is? A construction flaw, maybe. Or a hiding place for rats, he replied, trying to deflect my attention. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a peculiarity. That afternoon, while Jake immersed himself in his research, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. I needed to clear my head, but at the same time, my instinct told me something was very wrong. The houses around were cozy, with well-kept gardens and friendly neighbors, but I couldn't shake the feeling of discomfort. All the conversations I had with the neighbors had a tone of silence about the former resident. No one spoke much of her. Returning home, I found Jake still sitting at the computer, surrounded by yellowed papers and documents he had printed. I found an old letter, he said, excited. It mentions a portal and shadowy figures. This might be related to what we're experiencing. A portal? Hashtag, the word sounded strange on my lips. You can't be serious. What does that mean? I'm not sure yet. But the house was full of secrets. It's possible that the former resident was involved in something that led her to disappear. Jake looked at me with an intense gleam in his eyes, yet there was also a worry I couldn't ignore. You need to see this. He showed me the letter, the words scrawled in an old, almost frantic handwriting. It talks about rituals and the need to keep the door closed. If not, something terrible might happen. That's scary, Jake. What do you mean by something terrible? I felt a chill run down my spine. The hole, which had previously intrigued me, now seemed like an abyss of mystery and terror. I don't know, but we need to find out more about this. We need to talk to someone who knows the history of the house, he said, determined. From that day forward, I started paying more attention to what was happening around us. And to my surprise, Jake seemed increasingly obsessed with the investigation. He spent hours reading about the history of the town, talking to neighbors, and even researching in local libraries. I tried to support him, but with each passing day, the tension grew. I felt more and more isolated, as if I were watching a tragic play from the audience. One night, while lying in bed, I heard Jake murmuring to himself. I got up and went to the living room, where he was, eyes fixed on the hole. Jake? I called hesitantly. What are you doing? I just feel like something is about to happen, he replied, his voice low and tense. The whispers are louder tonight. You can't keep doing this. It's not healthy. You're losing yourself in this obsession, I said, trying to touch his arm. He flinched, as if I were touching a sensitive spot. You don't understand, Emily. I need to know what happened. This could be the key to everything, he shouted, and I fell silent, shocked. I just want you to be safe, Jake. And I want you to listen to me. This isn't normal. He sighed, as if battling an inner dragon. I don't know what to do. I feel like something is calling me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The whispers seemed to echo in my mind, and when I finally managed to relax, I was dragged into a nightmare. Shadowy figures danced around me, whispering words I couldn't understand. When I woke up, I was in a panic, gasping for breath and sweaty. Jake! I called, running to the living room. He was there, but his gaze was distant, as if he were in another world. You need to listen to me. I had a nightmare, and there was something about the hole. About the hole. He seemed more interested now. What did you see? There were shadows, familiar faces. I couldn't see clearly, but there was a sense of despair. I can't ignore this anymore, Jake. We need to stop investigating. Something isn't right. He hesitated, but the determination in his eyes didn't fade. I can't stop now. I feel like we're close to something. We need to understand what's going on. The weight of the situation began to suffocate me. As Jake sank deeper into his research, I started finding small, old objects near the hole. One day, I found a worn necklace with a heart-shaped pendant, and on another occasion, an old doll with a scratched face that seemed to have belonged to a child. Fear settled in my heart. Jake, this is very strange. We need to back away from the hole. He ignored my concerns, diving even deeper into the details of the former resident. She had a daughter. These objects may belong to her. We need to understand what happened. Jake, we can't become obsessed with this. These objects aren't doing us any good. This is all very disturbing, I pleaded. But he was so focused that he didn't notice the intensity of my voice. The nights grew longer and darker, and the atmosphere in the house seemed to change with each passing day. The hole in the wall was now like an eye watching us. And amid all this, the tension between us was growing. I tried to be understanding, but Jake's obsession was pushing us further apart. One night, while he was again immersed in his research, I decided to confront him. Jake, can't you see what this is doing to us? We're losing ourselves here. Losing? I'm trying to uncover the truth. You don't understand that this could help us. We can solve this together, he replied, but his voice carried a frustration I couldn't ignore. "I don't know if we want the same thing, Jake," I said, feeling my heart tighten. "I just want you to listen to me and for us to be happy again. We don't need to unravel mysteries for that." He paused, looking at me with a mix of confusion and pain. "Do you really think I can just ignore this? That I can leave behind what's happening here?" "Sometimes, it's better to leave the past where it belongs," I murmured, but he didn't seem to hear. The distance between us was becoming an abyss. And so, the house that should have been a home, a refuge, turned into a labyrinth of secrets and distrust. The hole in the wall, which had once been a mere curiosity, became a symbol of everything we were facing. Jake and I were on a collision course, and the true nature of our relationship was about to be tested in ways we could never have imagined. The atmosphere in the Victorian house was heavy, as if an invisible fog enveloped every room. I could hardly believe that, with each passing day, the excitement of change was transforming into an oppressive feeling. Jake was so focused on his investigations about the hole in the wall that he barely noticed how isolated I was feeling. It was as if we were living in different worlds, and this division between us only seemed to widen. That night, while I sat at the kitchen table watching Jake flip through old papers and books about the history of the house, I couldn't help the frustration building inside me. He was so absorbed in his research that he hardly noticed my absence. The silence became deafening, and the only thing I could hear was the sound of pages being turned and the whispers that, somehow, still echoed in my mind. "Jake," I called, breaking the silence. "Don't you think you should take a break from this obsession? The hole is nothing more than a peculiarity of the house." He looked up, his eyes shining with a mix of excitement and determination. "You don't understand, Emily. There's something more here. I feel it. The whispers, they have meaning." "Whispers?" I scoffed, crossing my arms, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. "What do you mean? I don't hear anything. And you know this is scaring me." Jake sighed, clearly frustrated. "I know you're scared, but I can't just ignore this. The former resident disappeared. I can't let that go." "But what about us, Jake? What's happening to us?" My voice rose, and the anger began to overflow. "You're so focused on this hole that you seem to care more about it than me." He hesitated, the expression on his face shifting, as if I had hit a nerve. "You're being irrational, Emily. This isn't just a hole. It's a mystery. And you need to understand that I need to uncover the truth. I understand that you're curious, but this is tearing us apart. You're so obsessed that you don't see how much it's affecting me," I said, feeling tears well up in my eyes. The truth was, I was scared. Scared of what Jake might find, scared of what the hole could mean, and above all, scared that he would drift away from me. He stood up, frustration evident in his tone. "I just want to understand what's happening. I'm not trying to push you away, but I can't ignore this. I need to know." Those words cut me. I wanted him to see that he was losing me. "And if you find something you can't handle? What if it destroys us? How can you say that?" He seemed offended, and I realized I had crossed a line. "I'm doing this for us, for our safety." "Safety?" I laughed bitterly, though it was laced with pain. "You think being obsessed with a hole in the wall keeps us safe? That's insane." The tension between us was palpable. I got up from the table and went to the living room, trying to distance myself from the argument. Hashtag, but the truth is that I couldn't escape what was happening. The house, with all its secrets, seemed to be absorbing our fight. I looked at the hole in the wall, that small space that had become the center of our lives, and a shiver ran down my spine. "You're not being fair, Emily," he said, following me. "I just want to find answers." "Answers to what?" "To what happened to that woman. To what you're hearing. You're not listening to what I'm saying. I'm not just scared of the hole, Jake. I'm scared of how this is changing us. Jake closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to calm himself. When he opened them again, there was sadness in his gaze. I don't want this to tear us apart. I love you. I love you too, but this obsession is destroying us, I said, my voice trembling. You're drifting away from me. He fell silent, and for a moment, the silence between us was deafening. I hoped he would understand. That he could see that the hole in the wall wasn't just a mystery to be solved, but a crack in our relationship. I just want you to help me, Emily. I need you to trust me, Jake said, his voice soft, almost pleading. If you don't support me, it's only going to get worse. I can't just ignore how I feel. I'm trying, but it's hard when you seem so far away, I replied, feeling the tears stream down my face. You need to choose between the hole and me. He looked shocked by my declaration. You can't put me in that position. It's not fair. But it's the truth. And you know it, I said, finally allowing the weight of my frustration and fear to manifest. We need to find a way to deal with this together, or we're going to end up losing each other. Jake looked at me, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the man I loved. The man who was so eager to build a new life by my side. But that man was being consumed by obsession and the need to unravel the mystery. I'll try, Emily. I promise I'll try to find a balance. But I can't just ignore this. I can't stop investigating what's happening, he said, determination still present in his voice. I understand, but you need to include me in this. We have to face this together, or we won't make it, I said, feeling a flicker of hope revive. We can confront this as long as we're together. He nodded slowly, but doubt still lingered in his eyes. I knew he wanted to believe he could resolve everything, but the truth was we were sinking into a sea of uncertainties. The hole was more than just a structural anomaly, it was a reflection of the fissures in our relationship. In the following days, I struggled to understand what was happening to me. The disturbing visions I began having weren't just nightmares, they were echoes of a reality that seemed increasingly distant. At night, while Jake buried himself in books and documents, I found myself trapped in a cycle of fear and insecurity. The shadows on the walls seemed to move, and the whispers that had once been mere distant sounds were now a constant presence. Jake, I can't keep doing this, I told him one morning over coffee. The sun was streaming through the window, but the light couldn't dispel the darkness that was accumulating inside me. These visions, they're getting stronger. You're letting your imagination run wild, he replied, but his voice carried a note of concern. You need to calm down. How can I calm down when all this is happening? Don't you see what's around us? That hole, it's like it's sucking away our sanity, I said, feeling frustration rise again. Can't you see this isn't just a curiosity? It's a threat. He hesitated, and I saw he was struggling to understand. I don't want you to suffer. I want to protect you. But I need to discover the truth. But the truth could be more terrible than you imagine, I replied, my voice low, almost a whisper. And I don't know if you're prepared for that. Jake looked down, and for a moment, the silence between us was heavy. I wanted him to understand that the hole wasn't just a mystery to unravel, but a doorway to something that could consume us. And with that, something inside me began to break. The connection we once felt was unraveling, and I feared that if we didn't act soon, we could lose each other forever. The day was overcast when Tom arrived. The heavy atmosphere hanging over the house seemed to thicken even more with his presence. I welcomed him at the door, trying to hide the nervousness that consumed me inside. The house, with its old walls and mysterious hole, seemed to have a life of its own, and with each passing day, the feeling that we were being watched became more inescapable. Hey, Jake. How's it going? Tom asked, his casual tone contrasting with the tension I felt. Oh, you know, the house is full of surprises, I replied, trying to force a smile. You'll see. There's a hole in the living room that's pretty peculiar. Peculiar, how? Tom raised an eyebrow, curious. I didn't know whether to tell him about the whispers I heard at night, so I just led him inside the house. As soon as we entered, the atmosphere grew even heavier. Emily was in the kitchen, making coffee. When she saw Tom, her face lit up a bit, but soon the worried expression returned. "Hi, Tom," she said, with a smile that seemed a little tense. "You can't imagine the craziness our life has been here." "Oh, I can imagine. Jake told me about the hole. We'll take a look later, right?" Tom replied, trying to lighten the mood. "Sure," I agreed, but a part of me hesitated. The hole had become a symbol of everything that was going wrong between us. After coffee, I decided it was time to show Tom the hole. We walked to the living room, and I felt the tension grow with each step. As soon as we arrived, the sight of the hole in the wall sent a chill down my spine. It was as if it were pulsating, inviting us to look closer. "Wow, this is interesting," Tom said, leaning in to examine the hole. "What have you found so far?" "Nothing that makes sense," I replied, trying to avoid Emily's gaze, who was standing in the doorway with a look of distrust. "Just whispers and some strange things." "Wait, you hear whispers?" Tom asked, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern. "Are you serious?" "I know it sounds crazy," I admitted. "But it's true. Sometimes it feels like someone is talking, or whispering." Emily doesn't believe me. "Jake, you know I care about you." "This might just be your imagination," Emily interjected, her tone genuine but tinged with frustration. "I'm not crazy. I just want to understand what's happening here," I retorted, feeling the anger and helplessness grow inside me. Tom looked between us, sensing the tension that had settled. "Maybe we should investigate the history of the house. There might be something that explains these phenomena. Something that helps clarify things." "Yeah, I've thought about that. But the research isn't yielding much." "I don't know where to start," I said, trying to hide the disillusionment in my voice. "Let's start with what we know. What have you found so far?" Tom suggested, his words giving me a thread of hope. "I found an old letter that mentions a portal, and some shadowy figures, but I couldn't quite grasp what that meant," I replied, glancing at the hole. It was as if it were challenging me to go deeper. "A letter? Do you have it here?" Tom asked, his curiosity piqued. "Yeah, it's on the work desk," I said, and headed over, pulling the letter from the envelope. "Look at this," I said, passing the letter to Tom. He read aloud, "I believe the hole is not merely a peculiarity of the house, but a portal to something we do not understand. The shadowy figures I see are somehow connected to it. I need to discover what it means before it's too late. What do you think that means?" Hashtag, Tom asked as Emily approached, her gaze fixed on the letter. "I don't know, but it seems like the former resident knew something. Maybe she tried to close the hole," I suggested, thinking about how everything fit together. "Or maybe she was pulled into it," Emily said, her voice low. "That's what I fear," I replied, looking at the hole again. "What if it's not just a hole? What if it's a door to something more?" Tom shook his head thoughtfully. "We need to find out more about this woman. What happened to her? Where is she now? I'll go to the library tomorrow and look for more information. There might be old records that can help us understand what we're facing," I said, determined to uncover the truth. "I can go with you," Tom offered, and I felt relieved. Having someone by my side for this search was exactly what I needed. "Great. And Emily, could you stay here and, maybe try to research something online?" I suggested, remembering she had a knack for finding information. "Sure, I can do that," she replied, but her expression was distant, as if she were already lost in her own thoughts. The atmosphere in the house continued to deteriorate, but with Tom by my side, I felt there was a chance to resolve everything. Throughout the night, we talked more about the house, the whispers, and our concerns. I was determined to face whatever was waiting for us. That night, as I prepared to sleep, anxiety took hold of me. I went to bed, but the image of the hole danced in my mind. What else might be hidden there? What did I not know? When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed of shadows and whispers echoing in my mind. I woke with my heart racing, the sound of something whispering still ringing in my ears. It was as if the house were alive, whispering secrets I couldn't understand. The next morning, I went to the library with Tom. With each step, my heart beat faster. The place was dark and dusty, but the feeling of discovery excited me. Let's look through the city records. There might be something about the former resident, I said to Tom as we began to flip through the record books. After hours of research, we found a record of a woman named Clara, who had lived in the house over 50 years ago. What was more intriguing, however, was the description of her death. Clara had mysteriously disappeared, and no one knew what happened to her. "This is strange," Tom commented. "Why did no one ever look for her? It's as if she simply vanished. Maybe she got involved with the hole. Maybe she tried to cross over and couldn't come back," I suggested, the thought unsettling me. "We need to find more information. Who knows if there's a diary or something?" Tom said, looking around the library. We spent a few more hours searching but found nothing besides a few newspaper articles mentioning the disappearance. Frustrated, we decided to return home and share our findings with Emily. When we got back, the house felt heavier than before. The tension in the air was palpable. Emily was sitting on the couch, a worried expression on her face. I couldn't find much online, just some comments about the house, but nothing specific about Clara, she said, looking at us with a sad expression. "We found some information, but not enough. Clara disappeared, and no one knows what happened to her," I replied, feeling the weight of the revelation. "That's scary. What if the hole has something to do with this? What if she's still there?" Emily asked, her gaze drifting into the void. "We have to uncover the truth. We can't leave it like this," I said, determined. The tension between us was rising, but now we had a clear objective. We needed to confront the entity behind the hole. We were on a dangerous path, but it was the only one we had. Night fell, and with it came the darkness that seemed to seep into the house. With every whisper I heard, my anxiety grew. I knew the hole was becoming a focal point in our lives, and I needed to understand what was happening. Tom suggested we stay awake all night to see if anything happened. I agreed, even though I knew it could be a bad idea. But the curiosity was strong, and the need to uncover what was going on outweighed the fear. As we settled in the living room, the tension in the air was palpable. The hole seemed to be calling to us. The atmosphere in the house was increasingly heavy, as if the air were infused with a dense, oppressive energy. I felt like a puppet, with invisible strings pulling me in opposite directions. The hole in the wall, with its mysterious call, seemed to have become the center of everything, and I couldn't escape the feeling that something was about to happen. As the days passed, the visions began to intensify, and I no longer knew what was real and what was a product of my imagination. That night, while trying to sleep, the darkness of the room seemed to swallow me. I closed my eyes, but images danced behind my eyelids, distorted figures moving in a frantic rhythm. I found myself back in the living room, the hole pulling me in like a magnet. The shadows I used to ignore now seemed to cluster around it, whispering secrets my heart didn't want to hear. I jolted awake, my chest heaving. Beside me, Jake slept peacefully, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I got up carefully, trying not to wake him. The moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating the living room with a silvery glow. My feet touched the cold floor as I walked toward the hole. With each step, my unease grew, as if an invisible force were drawing me closer. "What do you want from me?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The answer came in the form of a whisper, so soft that I thought it might have just been the wind. "Emily," my heart raced. I knew I hadn't imagined it. The whisper was real. I looked around, but the house was silent. Only darkness surrounded me. Drawn by the voice, I approached the hole and, with a hesitant movement, placed my hand on the wall around it. The surface was cold and rough, as if it had absorbed the pain of those who had passed through before. I closed my eyes again, trying to listen more clearly. "Emily, come," it was a familiar voice, but I couldn't identify who it was. A chill ran down my spine. I needed to tell Jake, but doubt consumed me. He had been so absorbed in his research about the house and the former resident that I feared it would just be another worry for him. He'll think I'm crazy, I thought. But the truth was, I couldn't ignore what was happening. The next morning, when Jake woke up, I decided to confront him. He was in the kitchen, making coffee. The smell of the hot liquid filled the air, but it wasn't enough to dissipate the cloud of anxiety hovering over me. "Jake, we need to talk," I began, my voice shaking a little. "About what, love?" He turned to me, his smile quickly fading when he saw my serious expression. "You look pale." "It's about the hole in the living room," I replied, swallowing hard. I heard something. Last night." Jake frowned, a shadow of concern crossing his face. "What did you hear?" "I heard a voice. I don't know who it was, but it called my name. And I saw things, Jake. Things that scared me." I looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of understanding. "The shadows, they're closing in on me." "Emily, you can't take this so seriously," he said, trying to be gentle, but his voice was tinged with skepticism. "It could just be your imagination. You know the house is full of stories and legends. This might just be your subconscious playing tricks on you." But it's not just that. I was losing my patience. "You don't understand how it is. It's like something is watching me, something I can't see. Don't you feel it? The house has a strange energy." Frustration rose in me like a wave. "And I found things, Jake. Old objects near the hole. You need to believe me." He hesitated, and the expression in his eyes changed, reflecting a mix of concern and skepticism. "What did you find?" "A necklace, an old doll, ####, things that shouldn't be there." I went to the living room and grabbed the items I had hidden in a box. "Look, Jake." I placed the doll and the necklace on the table, watching for his reaction. He picked up the doll, examining it closely. "This is just an old toy, Emily. Many old houses have things like this. We can't let it take control of us." He was trying to calm me, but something inside me rebelled. I needed him to see the truth, to feel what I was feeling. "You're not listening, Jake. The shadows are getting closer and closer. I'm not crazy. I'm scared." Frustration bubbled over, and tears began to stream down my face. "I don't know what to do." He stepped closer, wrapping me in an embrace. "Calm down, love. We'll figure this out together. I promise I'll investigate more. But you need to trust me. We can't let this drive us apart. We'll face this hand in hand." Those words should have comforted me, but a part of me felt increasingly isolated. Each day, the connection between us seemed to fray, as if the hole in the wall was sucking away our trust. I wanted to believe he was right, that it was all just an illusion, but the visions continued to haunt me. That night, while Jake immersed himself in reading more about the house's history, I retreated to our bedroom. The shadows seemed to dance in every corner, and I knew I had to confront my fears. The darkness was closing in, and I could no longer ignore what was happening. As soon as I closed my eyes, the vision began to form before me. The shadowy figures were there again, clearer and more defined than before. They moved toward me, and I could see their faces. They were familiar faces, but twisted, as if pain and suffering had contorted their expressions. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. It was as if a weight was pressing down on my throat. I was paralyzed. Emily, the voice whispered, but now it was no longer a call. It was a warning. Come, panic consumed me. What did they want? What had I done to deserve this? In a surge of impulse, I got up, determined to go to the hole again. I needed to understand, to confront what was haunting me. Crossing the living room, I felt the cold floor beneath my feet, and the moonlight illuminated the hole, making it seem even more sinister. Jake! I called, but he didn't respond. The silence of the house was deafening. As I approached the hole, the voice sounded again, stronger. Emily, come, I hesitated, fearing what might happen. But a part of me was irresistibly drawn to it. With a cautious movement, I placed my hand on the wall. The surface was cold, almost icy, and as I touched it, a wave of energy coursed through my body, making my heart race. The images in my mind began to distort and swirl. Please, no, I whispered, but it was too late. A pulsating light began to emanate from the hole, and the shadowy figures became more vivid. I knew I had to fight, but fear paralyzed me. And then Jake appeared, rushing through the living room door. Emily, what are you doing? He was pale, his eyes wide with concern. What happened? I looked at him, the struggle between the desire to understand and the fear of losing myself bubbling within me. Jake, I need to go in. I need to understand what's happening here. No. You can't do that. He moved quickly, grabbing my arm. We can't let this consume us. Let's solve this together. Please, stay calm. But the light was intensifying, and the shadows were moving toward us. Jake, I can't just stay here. Desperation took hold of me, and the voice whispered louder, as if feeding off my fear. I can't stay here. I can't. Emily, please listen. He held my face, forcing me to look into his eyes. You're not alone. Don't let this control you. We'll figure this out together, but we can't jump in without knowing what's. The night had arrived with an almost palpable intensity, and the storm brewing in the sky seemed to mirror the turmoil unfolding within the house. The wind whistled through the old windows of our Victorian home, making the glass tremble, as if the very structure was aware of what was approaching. It felt as if the house were alive, pulsating with an energy I couldn't comprehend. As I watched the storm, a chill ran down my spine. The hole in the living room wall seemed to glow with a strange light, a light that shouldn't exist in such a dark place. Jake, are you really thinking about getting close to that hole? Look at the storm outside. Emily exclaimed, concern etched on her face. She stood firm, like a rock, but I could see she was breaking apart inside. Her fear was almost palpable, like a shadow hanging over us, and I felt that my attraction to the hole was somehow a challenge to her sanity. I just want to understand, Em. The whispers, they're getting louder, clearer. I can't just ignore this, I replied, my voice coming out more intense than I intended. What I really wanted was for her to join me in this quest for answers, but the truth was that she was pulling away from me, as if the very air between us had become toxic. Don't you see this is dangerous? What if this is something we can't control? What if it's a trap? She was almost in tears, and I felt bad for not sharing her fear, for not fully grasping the gravity of the situation. I need to do this, Emily. I need to know what's happening. And if it's not just any hole? What if it's something more? I stepped closer to the wall, my hand instinctively reaching out toward the hole. The surface of the wall seemed to vibrate under my fingers, and a surge of adrenaline shot up my spine. Jake, no. Wait. She shouted, but it was too late. As soon as I touched the edge of the hole, a pulsating light emitted from it, and the environment around us seemed to distort. It was as if I had flipped an invisible switch, and the whole house responded with a tremor. Look at this. I said, fascinated, as the light danced around the hole. It's like it's alive. But deep down, I knew something far darker was at play. Jake, this isn't normal. We need to get out of here. Emily was visibly agitated, her eyes fixed on the light as if she were hypnotized. We can go home, we can stay away from this place. Just, promise me you won't get any closer. I hesitated. The idea of leaving the house bothered me, but the thought of exploring the pulsating light was even more alluring. I need to understand. Just for a moment, please. Don't leave me to do this alone. The desperation in my voice seemed to be a plea, and I didn't know if I was asking her to stay or apologizing for being so obsessed with this mystery. She took a deep breath, as if trying to calm herself, but the tension between us was intensifying. Jake, you're putting yourself in danger. Look at what happened to the former resident. Do you really want to end up like her? Her words echoed in my mind, and the memory of the missing woman hit me like a punch to the gut. But the light was there, pulsating, calling to me. I just need a little more, I murmured, not realizing how soft my voice had become, almost like a whisper. No, Jake. We need to leave now. Emily moved closer to me, her hands gripping my arm tightly, trying to pull me back. But it was too late. The hole began to emit a sound, a hum that seemed to resonate through the walls, and I knew I couldn't back down now. Look! I shouted, pointing at the figures starting to emerge from the light. They were long, distorted shadows, undefined faces that morphed and dissolved, as if the light itself was made of nightmares. Are you seeing this? We need to find out what it is. Emily was frozen, her eyes wide with horror. Jake, please, no. This isn't right. We need to go. But my curiosity was far beyond my control. The shadows seemed to dance and contort, and I couldn't look away. I can't just ignore this, Emily. If we have any chance of understanding what's happening, we need to face it now. You don't understand. This could be a trap, she shouted, her voice heavy with desperation. You don't know what you're doing. But I felt myself being pulled toward the hole, as if an invisible force was drawing me in. I just need to know. I managed to say as the light intensified. It was as if the hole was opening up, revealing a world beyond my imagination. Jake! Her cry echoed in the room, but I was beyond reason, beyond fear. Jake! And then, before I could process, the light expanded, engulfing everything around me. The sensation of being pulled was instantaneous and overwhelming. I couldn't resist. The world around me distorted into a whirlwind of shadows and lights, and I felt my body being dragged into the hole. Emily was screaming, her hands reaching out for me, but I couldn't reach her. I was being consumed by darkness. No. Jake! Her voice echoed in my mind as I was sucked into a new world. The hole was now a portal, and I had no idea what awaited me on the other side. When I was finally ejected, my body fell onto a ground that seemed formless. A thick mist enveloped everything around me, and the shadows that were once mere distorted figures now became palpable entities, dancing in the darkness. I struggled to rise, trying to understand where I was. Emily! I shouted, but the mist seemed to absorb my voice. The anguish grew in my chest as I realized I was alone. The place was a distorted version of our home, with walls that seemed to stretch and shrink as if they were breathing. Everything that was familiar was now covered by a layer of horror. Jake! Emily's voice emerged like a distant echo. I followed the sound, running through the mist, but everything seemed to change with each step. The shadows became sharper, and I could hear murmurs, whispers that seemed to come from all sides. It was as if the very environment was filled with pain and regret. Emily! I called one more time, but the mist seemed to swallow my words. I needed to find her. The feeling of loss consumed me, and the thought that I might be trapped here forever was terrifying. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I caught sight of a figure in the distance. Emily! I shouted, running toward her. Her face appeared through the mist, but there was something different. A distant look, almost lost, as if she were struggling against something I couldn't see. "Jake!" She turned to me, her eyes filled with despair. "You shouldn't have come here. We need to get out." I know. But what's happening? Where are we?" I reached her and pulled her closer, trying to grasp the situation. It's like a nightmare," she said, trembling. "The shadows are alive. They're feeding on us. We need to find a way out." I said, my mind racing. There has to be a way back. But the mist began to close around us, and the shadows seemed to move with more intensity. I could feel their presence, as if they were watching our every move. "Jake, we need to concentrate. Did you hear what they said? They want to separate us." The figures started to approach, and fear took hold of me. I didn't know what to do. "Stay close to me, we can't separate," I shouted, but the shadows seemed to revel in our panic. They moved quickly, dancing around us as if. The storm raged outside, lightning illuminating the night as if the very sky were in agony. The sound of rain pounding against the windows of the Victorian house felt like a distant echo, a rhythmic beat that blended with the whispers emanating from the hole in the wall. The atmosphere was charged, and I could feel the tension in the air, as if something was about to happen. The idea of approaching the hole paralyzed me, but curiosity and the need to understand what was happening pushed me forward. "Jake, I don't think we should do this," Emily said, her voice trembling, nearly swallowed by the thunder. She was by my side, her expression reflecting a mix of fear and concern. "That thing, it's not normal. We can't ignore the signs. Emily, I need to know what's happening." "Those whispers, they're calling to me," I replied, trying to keep calm. The truth was, I was more confused than ever. With each passing day, the house felt more alive, and the hole in the wall became a symbol of the darkness that was creeping into our lives. "I can't just stay here and ignore this." She shook her head, her wet hair sticking to her face. "You don't understand. It's not just a hole, Jake. It's something more. I see things, shadows. And you're so obsessed that you're losing sight of what's real." I wanted to argue, to convince her that my search for answers was valid. But as I looked at the hole, a sense of despair began to settle in me. What I was about to do could change everything between us, and deep down, I knew that. If I don't find out what's going on, it might be too late. For us. "So you're really going to take that risk? This isn't a game, Jake." The frustration in her voice was evident, and I could see she was on the brink of collapse. "I won't let this destroy us, Em. I'm going to face whatever is in there," I said, determined. In a sudden impulse, I reached out toward the hole. The air around me seemed to vibrate, and the light emanating from it was hypnotizing, almost as if it was pulling me in. "Jake, no!" Emily screamed, but it was too late. My finger touched the edge of the hole, and a wave of energy coursed through my body. It felt like an electric shock, and in an instant, everything around me began to spin. I found myself in a completely different place. The reality around me dissolved like a dream fading away, and I stood in a dark dimension. The colors were dull, and the atmosphere was thick with a fog that seemed to whisper dark secrets. It felt like I was in a nightmare, but the sensation of being there for real was undeniable. "Emily!" I shouted, but my voice echoed like a lost lament. Desperation took over me. Where was she? I needed to find her. The darkness around me felt alive, and the shadows danced in a macabre choreography. I could sense the presence of something that was watching me, waiting for the right moment to capture me. Suddenly, I heard a familiar whisper, an echo of what I had heard in the house. It was the same voice, the same tone. "Jake." The voice seemed to call me, but it was different. It was deeper, more distorted. "Who's there?" I asked, trying to maintain my bravery. But deep down, I was terrified. The shadows around me began to stir, and I saw indistinct shapes moving, as if they were approaching me. "Where's Emily? What do you want from me?" "You cannot escape who you are," the voice whispered. "All your fears, all your insecurities, they are here, Jake. They always have been." I looked around, and the shadows began to take shape. Figures reflecting my worst fears emerged. I saw myself, but it was a distorted version, with a vacant stare and a cruel smile. "You're not good enough," the figure taunted. "You never will be. Shut up." I yelled, trying to push the vision away. But the truth behind it was undeniable. I had always felt insecure, always doubted myself and my ability to make Emily happy. "This isn't real." "Real or not, you can't run from yourself," the voice echoed once more, and the shadows began to close in, surrounding me. "You need to face the truth." "No. I won't let you control me." I was fighting against it, but the pressure was overwhelming. The shadows began to draw closer, and I felt the presence of something even deeper and more threatening, something that fed on my fear. It was as if I were being pulled into an endless abyss. But in that moment, a light cut through the darkness. It was a warm light, familiar, like a beacon in the storm. The light began to expand, pushing the shadows away and revealing Emily in the distance. ####, she was there, and her gaze was one of pure determination. "Jake! Come to me," she shouted, her voice echoing like a cry of hope. It was as if her light was the only real thing in this nightmare. "Emily!" I ran toward her, but the shadows tried to hold me back, dragging me away. "No. I won't let this hold me back." I fought against the darkness, focusing on the light emanating from Emily. "You are stronger than they are. Confront your fears." She extended her hand, and the light intensified, illuminating the path. With one last effort, I pushed the shadows away and reached for the light. As soon as our hands touched, a wave of energy coursed through my body. The darkness around us began to dissolve, and I felt a comforting warmth. It was as if we were merging into one. "Come on, Jake. Together." Emily pulled me strongly, and together we began to move toward the light, facing the darkness that tried to separate us. The shadows screamed, a cacophony of distorted voices echoing around us. "You cannot escape. You belong to us." But the light we created was strong enough to push them away. I could feel courage growing within me, and a renewed determination propelled me forward. When we finally reached the center of the light, the darkness began to dissipate, and I realized that the battle was not just against the shadows but against the fears that had always dwelled within me. I looked into Emily's eyes and saw the same understanding reflected there. We were stronger together. "We're almost there," she shouted, and I squeezed her hand tighter, feeling the connection we had. "We won't give up," I declared, and with one final push, we launched ourselves into the light, ready to face whatever came next. The darkness was retreating, and I knew that regardless of what awaited us, we would face it together. The atmosphere was thick with tension and humidity when I decided it was time to act. The dark sky was lit by distant lightning, and the wind howled as if lamenting what was to come. With the diary of the former resident in hand, which I had found in the living room, the words on its pages seemed to echo in my mind. The ritual described there was my only hope to rescue Jake and Emily and perhaps to confront the shadow that had become our life. "Tom, are you sure this will work?" Emily's voice still resonated in my mind, filled with uncertainty and fear. But I had to believe it would. I looked at the yellowed paper, its edges darkened by time, and began to gather the elements I would need: a white candle, a bit of salt, and a photo of Jake and Emily that I had found in the house. This photo represented the light that still existed between them, even if it now seemed so distant. With trembling hands, I placed everything in an open space in the yard, far from the house but close enough for the vibrations of the whole to still be felt. The wind seemed to push me back, as if trying to prevent me from proceeding. "You can do it, Tom. They need you," I murmured to myself, trying to find courage in the words I always said to myself in the hardest times. Once everything was prepared, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I tried to focus on the instructions the diary provided. "May the energies of the universe unite to open a path between worlds," I recited aloud, feeling the words slip from my tongue. "May those who are lost be guided back to the light." The wind picked up, as if responding to my call. With each word I pronounced, I felt the energy around me intensifying. The candle began to shine with an intense light, and the energy became palpable, almost electric. "Come, Jake and Emily," I thought, wishing they could feel my presence, wherever they were. "I am here for you." The light of the candle transformed into a blinding glow, and I found myself surrounded by thick fog. The shadows around me seemed to stir, as if they were alive. "Focus, Tom," I told myself. "Don't let the shadows distract you." I looked at the photo of Jake and Emily and remembered the happy moments we had shared together. The laughter, the playfulness, the plans for the future. Those memories were the key to bringing the light back. "You have to fight, Jake," I whispered, as if I could transmit my encouragement through the fog. "You and Emily have to fight together." As the words left my mouth, a wave of cold swept through my body. The shadows seemed to draw closer, whispering in a low, threatening tone. "You cannot save them, Tom," a hissing voice echoed in the darkness. "They are lost. Accept it." "No. I won't give up on them," I shouted, defying the voice. "I know they are fighting. I know there is still hope." Feeling frustration rising within me, I looked up at the sky, which now seemed to be lighting up with a golden glow. It was as if the universe was listening. And at the same time, a part of me wondered if it was really possible to save them. I focused again on the instructions of the ritual, remembering every step. "May the light guide them back to me," I continued, my voice firm. "May the love we share be stronger than any shadow." The light of the candle began to pulse, and the shadows hesitated, as if being repelled by the words I was speaking. Then, I heard a laugh. A low, malevolent laugh that reverberated in the darkness. "Do you really believe that love can defeat darkness, Tom? They belong to me now." The voice was horrendous and full of contempt, but I could not let it shake me. I knew I had to continue. "Jake! Emily!" I shouted, feeling the energy intensify around me. "Come back to me. I am here." The light of the candle exploded in a wave of heat, and the shadows began to disperse, but the laughter echoed, making my heart race. "You cannot stop them, Tom. They are mine." The entity's words struck me hard, but I could not stop now. I knew the truth. The love between Jake and Emily was more powerful than any evil force. "They are not yours. They are my friends, and I will fight for them." Determination swelled within me as I spoke, and as I did, I felt a renewed strength. The shadows seemed to hesitate, and the light of the candle became a bright lamp, illuminating the darkness around me. "I call upon the forces of good and light to aid me," I said, my voice echoing with a power I didn't know I possessed. I could feel the energy building, and the shadows began to retreat. "May this portal open for those who are lost." With one final shout of determination, I made the gesture the diary described, and an explosion of light erupted from the ground, creating a glowing circle around me. The shadows began to fragment, and I knew I had reached a crucial point. "Jake! Emily! Come!" I shouted once more, with all the strength I had. The wind intensified, and I saw a form materialize within the circle of light. It was Jake, his eyes wide with surprise and fear. "Tom! What have you done?" he shouted, but I couldn't answer. The light was concentrating, and Emily appeared beside him, looking confused but determined. "You need to fight. The darkness cannot defeat us," I yelled, feeling that the energy was about to break. Fight against your fears. Remember what you have for each other. Jake and Emily exchanged a glance, and a spark of recognition passed between them. We have to unite. Jake shouted, and Emily nodded, her determination reflected in her gaze. The hole behind them was pulsating, and I realized time was running out. Now. Together. I screamed as the light became almost blinding. Jake and Emily joined together, and I saw the moment their hands intertwined. The space around them began to glow, and I knew that the strength of their love was about to break through the darkness that surrounded them. The entity screamed, a cacophony of rage and despair, but I couldn't let it shake me. You are stronger than this. Fight. I urged, and the light intensified even more. The shadow hesitated, and in an instant, the connection between Jake and Emily became a wave of energy that reverberated in the air. Hashtag. The shadows were pushed away, and the hole behind them began to shrink, as if being sucked in by the light. Come on. Don't stop now. I shouted, feeling adrenaline coursing through my veins. Jake and Emily were determined, and I knew victory was within our grasp. You are stronger than anything this darkness can throw at you. And in that moment, as the light shone brightly, I felt the space around us transforming. The shadows started to disintegrate, and the malevolent laughter fell silent, replaced by the sound of a gentle wind and the light enveloping us. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew we had taken an important step. With the power of love and friendship, we were about to face whatever came our way, together. The darkness around us was palpable, like a heavy cloak pressing down on us. I could feel the chill of the shadowy dimension penetrating my skin, and anxiety pulsed within me like a deafening drum. Emily was by my side, her pale face reflecting the distorted light emanating from the shadowy figures surrounding us. I knew we needed to unite and confront whatever this dimension was trying to show us. Jake, what are we going to do? Emily's voice trembled, but there was an underlying determination that I couldn't ignore. I looked into her eyes and saw fear, but I also saw a spark of hope. We need to face this together. This darkness, it feeds on our fear. If we can confront our shadows, maybe we can find a way out, I said, trying to convey courage. Emily nodded, but I could see the hesitation in her gaze. It was as if she were battling an internal whirlwind pulling her away from me. The shadows danced around us, forming grotesque shapes that seemed to twist and laugh at us. I could feel the pressure building, as if an invisible force was trying to separate us. I remembered what Tom had said before we followed him into this dimension: the true battle is against the demons inside us. Now, those words resonated in my mind like a mantra. Emily, do you remember the day we met? I asked, trying to pull her focus away from the shadows. The light emanating from us, although weak, seemed to intensify as we spoke about good times. Yes, she replied, her eyes lighting up for a brief moment. It was in that cafe, you were trying to make me laugh with your terrible jokes. Exactly. And you laughed anyway. You've always been the reason I fought to be a better person. I don't want to lose that. I moved closer to her, feeling the energy of her presence. I don't want to lose you either, Jake, she said, her voice almost a whisper. But, what if we don't make it? What if we can't escape? We can't think like that. We have to remember who we are, who we were before all of this. I took a deep breath, trying to gather all the courage I could. Let's fight for us. Let's confront our fears together. Then, the shadowy figures began to close in, and I could feel the pressure intensifying. One of them stood out, a form that seemed to writhe in despair. It was a distorted version of myself, a representation of everything I feared and hated. I recognized it immediately, the insecurity, the past mistakes, the doubt that always lingered. Jake, the shadow screamed, its voice echoing in my mind. You are weak. You will never be good enough for her. Shut up. I shouted back, rage and pain boiling inside me. I am not you. I am more than this. As I struggled against the figure, I saw Emily being confronted by her own shadow. She was almost paralyzed, her eyes wide with terror. I knew I needed to help her, but the shadow facing me seemed stronger with every passing second. "Emily!" I called, trying to grab her attention. "Remember who you are. Remember who you love." She looked at me, and her features began to change. The fear that had overwhelmed her was being replaced by determination. "You're right, Jake. I can't let this control me. I am stronger than my fears." With a scream of strength, she turned to confront her shadow. "I am not you. I am not just what you represent. I am strong, and I am free." In that instant, something magical happened. The light emanating from us began to shine intensely, and the shadows started to retreat. I felt a wave of warmth and hope flowing through me. The entity behind us, which had fed on our insecurities, was beginning to lose its power. "Jake, we need to unite," Emily shouted, and I ran to her. As soon as our hands met, a surge of energy coursed through our bodies. The light radiating from us became almost blinding, and the shadows began to writhe, screaming in pain. "You cannot do this. You have no power," the entity cried, but we were no longer alone. The light of our love and determination was growing stronger, and I knew we were about to win. "Yes, we do," I shouted, feeling the strength building inside me. "We are not just our insecurities. We are what we choose to be." Focusing all our energy, we began to create a brilliant sphere of light between us. The shadows started to dissipate, and the entity twisted, trying to cling to us, but there was nothing it could do. "Let's go, Emily. Together," I said, and with one final push of strength, we launched the sphere of light toward the entity. It screamed, a cry of despair and rage, as the light consumed everything around us. Then, a profound silence followed. The light enveloped us, and I felt a wave of relief and peace. When the light finally dissipated, I found myself back in the Victorian house, with Emily by my side. The hole in the wall was now just an ordinary hole, devoid of the malevolent aura that had surrounded it before. "Are we back?" Emily asked, looking around in disbelief. "Yes, we are," I said, still dazed. "We did it." She threw herself into my arms, and I wrapped her in a strong embrace. "I was so scared, Jake. I thought we wouldn't make it out." "I was scared too," I replied, relieved. "But we faced our fears and won. And that means we are stronger together." Then I looked at the hole in the wall, now so common and harmless. "Do you remember what the entity said? That the source of its strength was our insecurity?" "Yes," she replied, gazing at the hole with a mix of fear and understanding. "But now we know we don't have to let that control us. We must always confront our demons." "Exactly," I agreed. "We must continue to fight, not just against external forces, but against our own internal fears. The light we created today is a reminder that together, we can overcome anything." As we talked, I realized that the house, which once felt like a place of terror, now breathed a new air of hope. It was a new opportunity for us, a fresh start. "Let's redecorate this house," I suggested, trying to bring a smile to her face. "Let's make it a home." She smiled, and the light in her eyes reminded me of why I had fought so hard. "Yes, let's make it our home. A place where we can be ourselves, without fears." And so, together, we began to rebuild not just the house, but the trust that had been lost. We knew the fight would never completely end, but we were ready to face it together. The darkness had taught us a valuable lesson, the light we held within us was stronger than any shadow. As we look to the future, let's always remember that true strength comes from within, I said, as we contemplated the future together. "Yes, and that regardless of the challenges we face, we will never be alone," Emily added, holding my hand tightly. And as we gazed at the hole in the wall, now merely a symbol of our triumph, we knew we could always return, not to be consumed by darkness, but to remember the light we created together.